Welcome back to Drawing Near to God, an introduction to the Christian faith in the midst of difficult days. We've seen that God has revealed himself and that God cares about people. Today we're going to think about what has gone wrong with us. What has gone wrong with the people that God cares about and that God made? One of the happy consequences, and I know there are not a lot of happy consequences, but one of the happy consequences, or at least diverting consequences of the coronavirus, is the wave of internet creativity we've been blessed with. Funny memes, musical videos, talented readings. One of the sweetest internet creations recently has been by John Krasinski of Office fame, his news broadcast, the SGN, Some Good News. In a world of bad news, Krasinski does something we definitely need more of. He highlights only good news. He shows videos of a married man who can't be beside his wife because of the virus, though she has Alzheimer's and is in a nursing home. It shows this man outside her window singing her Amazing Grace as she remembers the words and sings with him. It shows a teenage girl returning home after her last chemo treatment to a neighborhood full of socially distanced friends, cheering her on. It's really good stuff. Krasinski's crying, you're crying, we're all crying. And there's no doubt that we need more of that kind of good news in the world. But Christianity teaches that we actually need more bad news. How can I say that? The news channels are already full of corrupt politicians, one war after another, one famine after another, one health crisis after another, and all of that on top of the local murders, shootings, rapes, and robberies. Why on earth would I say we need more bad news? The reason is that all of the bad news we see on TV really only looks at the symptoms. We're like people who get obsessed with the tumors that are growing on our bodies and never mind asking, is there cancer there? We look at the symptoms and never ask much about the cause. We don't because the cause brings us face to face with more bad news. The reason things are so bad in humanity, says the Bible, is that we are sinners under God's curse. That's what we'll look at today. Man has broken God's law, and people are under God's curse. First, we need to understand the law principle. And when I explain it to you, I think you'll find it familiar because it's been operating in your conscience since the day you were born. This is one of the most important truths of the Bible. The God of the Bible is a holy, moral God, and he's called us to obey him in everything. If we do not obey him in anything, and I do mean anything, the consequences are death. The law principle is this: if we obey God, we live. If we disobey God, we die. And this principle is repeated throughout the Bible, first at creation, which we'll look at in a moment, continually in our consciences. Remember in lesson 1, we saw that God's law was written on our hearts, and our consciences often accuse us. Third, the law was given to the nation of Israel, specifically in the 10 Commandments, where they were told that if they obeyed God perfectly, they would live, and if they disobeyed him, they would die. Finally, Jesus repeated the law principle when he said, if you would enter life, that is, live eternally, be in heaven with him, keep the commandments. Throughout the Bible, God gives his law, his standards, and the promise is, if they are obeyed, we will live. If they're disobeyed, we will die. The second thing we need to see is that we've all disobeyed God's law. The first two people on the planet, according to the Bible, were Adam and Eve. They were placed in the Garden of Eden, which really was a paradise. And in that paradise, they were told to pursue all the pleasures of this creation within the bounds of obeying God's law. God put it to Adam like this: the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. So here's the situation. We were placed in this beautiful creation, giving meaningful work to do, and we were told to enjoy ourselves with a smorgasbord of fruit trees. You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, peaches, plums, pears, you name it. They were all for our joy. Only one thing we were not to have, something called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, basically, that tree was a symbol for moral autonomy. To eat the tree was to say, I make my own laws now. But God said, don't eat the one tree I've banned. Eating that would be like saying, I'm in charge of what is good and evil now. But what happened is that Adam and Eve ignored God, and they ate the fruit of the tree. They chose moral autonomy. From the minute they did, they, along with all their descendants, became rebels against God under a death sentence. We became sinners under a curse. Now, not too many years later, they died, or actually a number of years later, they died. And every human being since Adam and Eve has chosen the exact same path that they did. None of us have obeyed God's law. The Apostle Paul puts it this way, there is none righteous, no, not one. And he tells us that there are serious consequences for this. Cursed be everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law and do them. Galatians 3:10. Everyone who has not done everything that God commands is under this death sentence curse that eventually leads to eternal condemnation in hell. Third, we know that we have disobeyed, and we know that we deserve to die. We saw this law principle, we saw that Adam and Eve disobeyed it, and we actually know that we've disobeyed it and that we deserve to die. Now, our first reaction to learning that we have sinned and broken God's law and now we deserve to die, and we all do die, is usually to be pretty disgusted with God. How could he inflict such a harsh sentence on us for just one sin, or even for some sins? Beneath that reaction is another truth about us. We actually know that this sentence is not harsh or unfair, but it's exactly what we deserve. In the book of Romans, we get this list of sins, this list of ways people break God's law. And then at the end of the list, we get an insight, a key insight. Speaking of people who are under God's curse, Paul says, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind, to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Now listen, though they know God's righteous decree, they know God's law. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Did you catch that? After a list of sins we would all need to plead guilty to. And if you say you've never gossiped, well, you probably have another problem. You're a liar. After this list of sins we all have something we could plead guilty to. The Apostle Paul says we know God's decree in our consciences. We know that doing those things means we deserve to die. After this list, he says, we know God's decree, then that's another way of saying we know God's law, that those who do such things deserve to die. We all know it. We know we're supposed to die. And isn't that obvious in our daily lives too? Even though our culture is trying to rid itself of every vestige of Christian influence and morality, you can't chase the guilt out of your own conscience. We know we deserve to die. We surround ourselves with people who say, it's all good, but depression, our despair, our sense of guilt, our relentless quest to have our good outweigh our bad, they all give us away. We are under God's law, we've broken it, and we deserve to die. No matter how many friends, movies, counselors, or other people tell us we're fine, we know we're not. Next time we get together, we move into the good news. But it's only good once you understand the bad. You cannot just hear some good news to cheer you up. We have to face the bad news about ourselves. And although there is still good in the world, at the core of each of us is unrighteousness. We have broken God's law. We are under his death sentence curse. Please be with us next time. I can't wait to tell you the good news. Until next time.